what an auspicious day to be doing stuff on. We have so many kind of like events that are here on the same day. Now, some of them are obvious. Like in this part of the world, solstice is today, not tomorrow. Okay, solstice is this evening. And for me, we're here to keep time, right? And so we have to keep time in the correct manner. And when an event happens at night on a Sunday, we do the ceremony at night on the Sunday, not kind of like on the Monday because it's more convenient or it's not going to rain in the morning or something like that. Like for me, it's really important to do things at their correct time. And so that's what we're going to be doing tonight. Now, what else is happening today? Okay, well, let's start with the solstice. Here in the northern hemisphere, we are at the point where the sun is, we could say, at its maximum energetic potential. Yeah, it's the longest day. It should be kind of like we receive the strongest energy from the sun right now. But where can this also fall into the calendar? Now, maybe you remember that back in February, we began the new Mayan solar year, the year of 9 Ik, the year of the breath of life, the year of the voice of the women. These are the things that I was kind of like seeing about them. And what I've recognized is that as we follow the year, we can see that the year is made up of 18 months of 20 days in the Mayan count. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then we're going to go underground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to come back again. Okay, so we began on 9 Ik, and I understand that you might not be able to see that exactly on the recording and that kind of thing. It's sort of like really more for like demonstration purposes. So we're going to go from 9 Ik. We would then go through the 3 Ik, 10, 4, 11, 5, 12 Ik, which was yesterday, yeah? Okay, so then we're going to go 6, 13, 7, 1, 8, and then we get back to, 8 to 9, and then we're going underground. So the 9 is going to occur here, and that will be somewhere around about the 6th of November, if I remember rightly. It's around about that sort of time. And so what we can see is that the year lord comes back again because we have a 260-day calendar. The 13 by 20 fits in here. But then to make it up to 365 days to go to the next part of the year, we need this extra 105 days. So we get another, well, that would be 9, 3, 10, 4, 11. And then on 5 Ik, then we get what is known as the Wayeb will begin. Okay, and so we can see this pattern. But what we can clearly see here is that, like, you can see that the year can be divided in two. One that we could call, well, I would call it life and death, because this is also usually rain, and that's growth. And this is kind of like harvest. Okay, and so what we see there is we've got this dividing point around about the 6th of November, interestingly enough, which is astronomical Samhain is around about there. We all celebrate like 1st of November or 31st of October, Halloween, and we're all going by that. But that's based on the Gregorian calendar, not on the astronomy of the thing. And the actual true date of it is usually more around about the 5th, 6th of November. So it's kind of interesting that that falls like that, and that we have this peak right here. So 12 Ik fell on the 19th of June. Theoretically, this is where we've got the sun at its peak. And so the sun is illuminating and giving its energy to the year lord of 9 Ik, yeah? We're hitting that point right there. this is the point when it's at the strongest. So if there was something for the women to be speaking about, now is the perfect time for them to be speaking about it because it's fully illuminated. We may find that in this next, well, after yesterday, this 20-day period that's going to begin on 12 Ik, we may find that that ends up being something where, we might get another Megan interview or something like that, where the voice of a woman comes out strongly to, let's say, challenge the patriarch, that kind of thing. It's also about the breath of life. It's about, really kind of like now's where we can go into it, and that everything is being fully illuminated. So that's happening right now. That's going to happen on summer solstice for the next, well, probably mostly for our lifetimes, because this start date of the 19th of February, the Mayan New Year, that's going to move back one day every 4 years. Okay? And so we could see that summer solstice is going to remain as the peak energy of that year for, like I say, the foreseeable future, let's say. Okay, so this is one way that I see today as being a very important day, because this is kind of like the peak energy of the Mayan solar year. So it's the peak energy of this breath of life, the peak energy of the voice of the women. So that's one way that we can see it. Now, it doesn't happen very often like this. In fact, it'll probably only happen once every 42 years or so, that we are also beginning this very important cycle that begins on 13 Akhabal, which is today, right? Now, this is something that I find very, very, very intriguing. So if you can cast your minds back to 21st of December 2012, okay? Do we all know what Mayan day that was? No? Like, it was the day 4 Achpu, 3 Kankin. Okay, and this was the beginning of, well, according to things from the Popol Vuh and that, it would be the beginning of the 5th sun, the beginning of the new sun. Okay, and I've seen a lot of stuff circulating lately about the beginning of the 6th sun and that kind of thing. Different traditions have different ideas. I'm working with one tradition here, and this is the idea from this tradition. I'm not saying anybody's right or anybody's wrong. Let's just put that out there. But if we go by this, it's the beginning of the 5th sun. Okay? Now, the beginning of the 4th sun. So if we say that's 20th of the 12th, 2012. Yeah? Okay? And that is the 5th sun. Okay? So, most of us would have been born in the 4th sun. Okay? Most of us are from the son of the corn people. That began on, depending on who you talk to, but usually it's seen as 13th of August, 3114 BC, okay? 5,126 years before this date. That's 13 Baktuns. That's a whole cycle, right? Now, you'll find this date commemorated on Stela C at Quiriguá, which is a beautiful, like, Quiriguá is the most amazing site. It's only a small site. It has a really, really interesting history. So, basically, Quiriguá was a taxation post for Copan. So Copan was this big city of about 30,000 people and all that kind of thing. And they had this little satellite site called Quiriguá, which is just over the border in Guatemala, or what's Guatemala now, and Copan is in Honduras. And Quiriguá was there to, let's say, for taxation purposes on jade, which was coming down the Motagua River. Okay? About 3,000 people lived at that site. And at some point, they decided, well, at some point, we know the date because the date is very well recorded. They decided they'd had enough, and they did a Kirexit, I suppose you would call it. And they decided to go to war against Copan. So you'd got like 3,000 against 30,000. They captured the king of Copan, and took him back and beheaded him in the town square kind of thing. And they nicked a bunch of artists from Copan, because Copan is like, again, it's a beautiful site, really, really worth visiting. Has these amazing, like, three-dimensional stelas, because you know normally the stelas are kind of like a tablet with that, like that, with a bunch of writing on it. Well, at Copan they are square, and so they have a big effigy of the king on the front, and then all the writing is on the sides. They're really, really cool. And Quirigua said, right, okay, we're having all your artists. It took the artist. Quirigua has one of the biggest stelas in the Mayan world, if not the biggest, right there. It also has all of this beautiful, beautiful art. And it was like, you know, kind of like spoils of war kind of thing. We're going to show Copan exactly what we're at. We're going to make our stelas bigger than them. Okay? Anyhow, one of the most important stela at Quirigua is called Stela C. And Stela C has this date on it. And of course, it's not 13th of August, 3114 BC. It's actually 4 Achpu 8 Kumku, which equates to 13th of August 3114 BC. Hi, come on in. No, please come on in. So, what can we see about these 2 dates? Well, they're both the beginning of a new cycle of time. They're both the beginning of a new sun. And what we see is that they're beginning on the day 4 Achpu. Okay, so 4 Achpu is about the new creation. Now, the way that I see it, Achpu is about the divine. It's the sun. It's kind of like the source, as it were. And the number 4 is the physical world. It's about bringing things into the physical. And so this is literally bringing the divine into the material realm. That's why it's a day of creation. Okay? So, as you can tell, I get rather excited about this because I just think that the calendar works on so many different levels that, you know, we got to see not just kind of like, as I was showing already with the count of the months, we're not just looking at like today's Akabao, tomorrow's Cat, next day's Can, and that kind of thing, seeing it day by day. We're also seeing the Trecenas. We're also seeing the 20-day period where the new solar month will always begin on an Ik day this year, and so on and so on. And so we see this, and I like to use the term holographic, which I've kind of been flamed for once or twice because people say it's a bit too new agey, but this is exactly what it is. It's kind of like cycles within cycles, gears within gears. One part of the whole representing the whole, and the whole being made up of all of these parts which are fractal in nature. Okay, so I see that as well. And so every 260 days, yeah, of course, every 5,126 years we're going to get a new cycle of the sun. But every 260 days we're going to find this 4 Achpu day. Okay, so it's a time to bring the divine into the physical realm. It's a time of new creation, to bring your divine into the physical as well. Now, why am I talking about that today? Well, today is the beginning of a very, very important process for that. And here is yet another fractal, another way of looking at the calendar and putting it together, and that's through the Mayan cross. Okay, so for any of you that have had your Mayan astrology done, you may have received your Mayan cross, yeah, and so you know what your Nawal is, you know what your past is, what your future is, what your feminine side is, what your masculine side is, yeah? But of course, this is going on throughout things. It doesn't just have to apply to us because we're human beings or anything like that. It is a different way of counting. And one of the things I see very much, it's kind of like, it's what brings the calendar to life. I often talk about how when you know your Nawal, it's a bit like saying, that's like a black and white picture, okay? And then when you know your number and your Nawal, that's like saying, you know now the color picture. And then when you know your number and Nawal and put it into the Mayan cross, that's like taking that color picture and making it move, because you see where it comes from and where it's going to. You see how it evolves. And so knowing the cross and seeing the evolution of each Nawal is really important. Now, we are on the day 13 Akhabal. Okay? And 13 Akhabal is the past of this very important day, 8 bats. Okay? And 8 bats, Washiki bats, is seen as, some people will call it the day of creation. Some people will say that, it's the beginning of the new ceremonial cycle. It's the beginning of the initiation cycle of new Akikab, new day keepers. And so you will find a lot of people being initiated on Washiki bats. You will also find the new initiates begin their path to finish it 260 days later when Washiki bats comes around again. Why is it so important? Why is it so holy? Well, in order to understand that, we have to follow it through to its future. And its future is 3 Kawok. Okay? So, one of my friends once showed me a lovely woman called Dolores over in Santiago Atitlan. She took me to a weaving museum one time when I was over there. And she showed me on a backstrap loom. She said, look, okay, here's the loom. And what happens? How do we explain this? Well, what happens, the first thing, the weaver wakes up with a dream. When she wakes up, she has this dream that she wants to translate into the physical world. Okay? And so the first thing she does is she goes to her loom and she sets up the warp of the loom. She sets up these threads. Okay? Now we know, just as if we think of this as being like conception of a human being, if conception happens there and we don't then do something with it, it will disappear. It will stop. Okay? If we take that loom away, those threads are just going to go back into nothingness. However, Akhabal represents this part of the loom. It represents the warp, the beginning of things. And this is where somebody has kind of like I say, this is the first materialization of, hang on, sorry, I'm just going to mute you. Okay, this is the first materialization of the dream into the physical world, right? But it needs some development. I sometimes think of Akhabal being rather like a pregnant woman. You can see that she's got a life growing inside of her, but we don't have any physical contact with that life, right? We can see the presence of it. It's coming. This is the Akhabal. This is between the worlds, like the twilight, like the dawn, the birth, the beginning of a new day. We're then going to take that. Well, what's the next thing that she's going to do? Well, she's going to start using the Batsibal, the shuttle, to move backwards and forwards and bring the other thread in. Okay? This, I know I said that Akhabal I see very much like this sort of like pregnant woman kind of thing, but Bats is actually also seen as gestation. And so we have conception here, and then 8 Bats is weaving it. It's just like this is actually the gestation. So we could consider that many things in the Mayan world could be seen as being woven. Right? I mean, everything's weaving, really. Poets weave words, musicians weave notes, artists weave colors. Everything could be seen as being weaving. And here we see it happening right here. So the 8 Bats could be very symbolic about the weaving of a new keeper of time. I also like to see it in a different way, another level, as being 1 Bats, and then we get 7 Bats, which is the old weaving, and we get 1 Bats, which is the new weaving, and the 8 Bats is the passing of the baton from the old to the new. It's like taking 2 pieces of cloth and bringing them together, creating a seam, joining the old with the new. Okay? So, a very, very auspicious day when we're bringing this conception together. Okay? And where does this conception come from? Well, the 13 is all about spirit. The 13 is all about the ancestors. So this is literally the concept which is coming from the ancestors, which is being woven or gestated through 8 bats, which we can understand, well, that's a very, very auspicious day to be doing that. And then we're going to 3 Kawok. Well, what's Kawok about? Well, the next part of our loom is where we have the finished cloth coming out. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Monday 28th of June is 8 bats. Okay. So we then go to 3 Kawok. Okay, and 3 Kawok is the birth process. Sorry, what was your question? Excuse me? Today is 13 Akabal. Okay, that's why I'm kind of like why I want to like put this in, because not only are we in 13 Akabal, we're also at this point of the highest point of the sun, illuminating the highest point of the year. So it's kind of like, you know, what you receive from spirit today, the concepts that you receive today. I mean, it's like I'd always say, well, I know we always like this rather negative phrase of be careful what you wish for, but be very aware of the concepts that you're planting today, because they're super empowered. Okay, what you're weaving into existence. So going back to 3 Kawok, Kawok, the midwife, the rain. Oh, we saw a bit of that today, right? Kawok, the rain falls. The dried, dead kernel of maize shoots, germinates. Okay, and so that's kind of like why the rain is seen as the midwife to the resurrection. Because sometimes when you look at little kernels of maize, they look like little skulls. It's funny, you look at them like little dried things. And that dried thing, you can stick it on your shelf for like a couple of years or something like that. And it looks like it's made out of wood or something like that. Put it in the ground and put a bit of water on it, and all of a sudden you get a green shoot coming out, right? It's quite miraculous in a way. And so if we consider that this is the resurrection of the maize Lord, Kawok is the midwife to that resurrection. The rain is the helper that makes the maize grow again. And Arpu, of course, the divine, but also representing the sun and representing the resurrection of the maize Lord. So, how does this all come into it? Well, the other thing that we have there is the number 3. And the number 3 can be seen as representing the home place, the place from which we emerge. Okay? Now I get very excited about the number. I get very excited about a lot of things by the look of things, don't I? But the number 3, there we go. I've got to get Orion in there somewhere, yeah? You may recognize that star constellation, if I can actually show it, as a star constellation of Orion. Okay? And we've got these 3 stars, Alnitak, Saif, and Rigel. They form the 3 hearthstones. Within the 3 hearthstones, well, if you've ever gone out and looked at Orion, you'll see there's a few other stars in there. You've seen his sword hanging down, yeah? His sword hangs down from his belt. Well, one of them stars looks a bit out of focus, right? Well, if you've got eyes like mine, they all look out of focus. But, you know, it's kind of like, there's this one in here that looks a bit smudgy. And if you take a picture of it, you'll actually see it's not really a star at all. It's a nebula. It's called M42, the Great Orion Nebula. These 3 stones are the hearthstones, and this is the fire of creation. And from what I have understood, both the Maya and NASA say that this is the place of emergence, that this is a cosmic nursery which probably gave rise to our sun. Okay, so this is literally sort of like our home place, and it's related to the 3. So sometimes when I'm talking about the three, I can say that the three might be a bit challenged, obstructed, or blocked, or something like that. But that's because, for us, looking at that, we're seeing fuzzy star. But the cosmic nursery, all of its power is on the inside. And so this is what threes are about. They've got all their power on the inside, and that's the inner focus that they've got to look at. And so the 3 walk we can see as the birth process coming from the place of emergence, coming from the home place. Now, if we know our calendars, we would know that the very next day after 3 walk is 4 Okay? And so the 4 that creation, that bringing of the divine into the material plane and all that kind of thing, this is like the process that's going on behind it. This is kind of like what's bringing that into the world now, what's bringing that new in. And so it's like literally this could also be seen as doing the groundwork and laying, like laying the foundation in order to bring in that 4 day. Okay, so I was just trying to, I'm sorry, I can't think off the top of my head of exactly what that is. You can look it up on my calendar and that kind of thing, exactly when it's going to be. It's going to be in kind of like early July, and yes, I should have been a bit more prepared for that, I guess, but like that's the way it is. So this, like I'd say, 4 I consider to be a very, very important day. 7th of July, thank you very much. So 7th of July, 7/7, there we go. That will be the day of 4 So it's kind of like, let's say that if you are doing a solstice ceremony today on 13 Akhabal, you're receiving, well, conception from the ancestors. The concepts of the ancestors, that's what we're bringing into this world. And between now and 4 between now and 7th of July, that's going through this whole gestation process. Okay? So it's a great time for creativity. It's a great time to be bringing things in that way. So it's sort of, and as I say, it's not often that it lines up with this time of the year when the sun is at its height, when everything is like particularly empowered. And so it's a great opportunity to make the most of it, right? So that was what I kind of like really wanted to share on that side of things with you today, because I think it's a very, for want of better words, potent portal. And this is also why, as I said, for me, for us over here in the Americas, for most of us, our solstice is going to happen today, not tomorrow. Now, I don't know whether that means that we get the bonus and the people who are going to be celebrating their solstice on one cat I don't know. But it certainly occurs to me that today is really the time to be planting those intentions and asking for guidance from Spirit as to kind of like what we're here to conceive. Okay, what we want to weave and what we want to create as the new world that we're going into for the next 260 days. What do you want to materialize into the world? What do you hold holy? I see that very much with the Achpu energy. It's sort of like, we've all got our divine path, and each of our divine paths is different, and we might not necessarily see somebody's own divine path as something that we recognize. But that's because it's not for us, right? So it's time to bring in what you hold holy and to ground it into this world. And starting today, look to your dreams tonight, because this is a very important day to receive those messages. Get out at sunset, because Akhabal days, today 13 Akhabal days are great times to be going out into the twilight It's like receiving the messages of the ancestors. If you've got a question about where you're supposed to be going, what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be creating, go out at sunset, make your fire or whatever. Maybe you'd start early, getting ready for solstice point and that kind of thing. But like, that's the time for the communication in the twilight on an Akabal day with the number 13 going on. Also, kind of like tonight, especially, watch your dreams and see what comes to you, because it's kind of like the 13 days are the days when they say that, you know, the joints are active, the antennas are up, and the ancestors are communicating with us. So this is the opportunity to receive the message about what's to be conceived in the next time. Okay?